Good morning, all. Getting folks on. We'll get started in just a minute, but um, thank you for being here. We're really excited for today's street outreach panel. As folks are coming on, and I'll remind us again, but as folks are coming on, if you don't mind, just typing in the chat your intro, so your name, the organization you're with, and then we'd love to know if you are part of or if your organization has a current street outreach program, or if you are thinking of starting one, just kind of let us know where you are in the street outreach space as we have folks coming on. Thank you so much. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, I see things coming in the chat. And so just starting with a little bit of housekeeping, you've all heard this before, but as a reminder, um, you will be muted upon entry, but we want to welcome questions during the panel today. So please raise your hand if you have a question as we're going through, and we'll also make sure to pause between every few questions and at the end to make sure we have time for your questions. That will be the good part of the discussion, hearing what you all want to ask, hearing what you think. So please make sure to raise your hand or just type in the chat as we go. And my colleague Cullen is on and he'll be pulling out questions as we go. And then just a reminder that this is being recorded today. So if you missed part of it or if you have colleagues you want to share this with, we'll have the recording available. And then just to remind everyone, the recording, meeting materials from past, and meeting information for future lift sessions will be on our website. So please visit there. We have several coming up for you that you can register for. And then just before I jump into today's schedule, as folks have jumped on, please just jump in the chat to introduce yourself. We'd love to know who's here today and give us a little information. Are you part of a current street outreach team? Does your organization have street outreach? Are you thinking of starting something? We'd just love to know where you're coming from in the street outreach space as we learn together today. And so our agenda for today, welcome to you all. Thank you for making time to be with us today. We're really excited for this session. And we're really excited for our panelists that have come to provide information on their street outreach programs. I'll do an intro to our panel, and then, as I mentioned, we'll jump into some uh, panel discussion questions, but we'll be taking your questions along the way and then time for Q&A at the end. As always, we will have a brief meeting survey poll at the end, and those that complete that poll will be entered in a drawing for a gift card incentive. So wanted to sweeten the deal there, and that survey really helps us understand what's helpful from our sessions and plan future sessions. So appreciate you filling that out. And not surprisingly, we found that folks, when they fill it out in the moment during the meeting, we get most of our replies that way versus later from an email or a link. So we just hope that folks can take that minute at the end. We'll have it pulled up. It's pretty easy to fill out. And then we'll talk about a couple of things that are coming up from the Lift Academy. So let's jump in. So I want to thank our three panelists for today who have agreed to come and share their knowledge and expertise in street outreach and answer questions from the group. Allison Blakeney from Adams County, Andy Sprain from Outreach Fort Collins, and Corey Kohler, who is from the city of Wheat Ridge, but part of the Jefferson County Housing Navigator team. So, a little extra, Allison is the Homeless Resolution Supervisor for the Department of Community Safety and Wellbeing at Adams County, and she oversees the outreach team. She has worked in food justice, anti-oppression education, domestic violence education and sheltering, and homelessness services. And on the fun side, she likes to spend time with loved ones, dance, go to the movies, eat delicious food, and laugh, which is a fantastic list. And then Andy, our friend Andy, is originally from Loveland and has lived in Fort Collins since 2007. He attended Iliff School of Theology in Denver and earned a master's degree in theological studies. He joined the Outreach Fort Collins team in 2017, starting as an outreach specialist and transitioning into various leadership roles. On the fun side for Andy, he likes to spend time outdoors with his family, hiking, skiing, and visiting national parks. And Corey Kohler formerly worked for Denver Human Services and with a local nonprofit that provided direct services. And 3.5 years ago, transitioned to become the housing navigator with the city of Wheat Ridge, part of the Jefferson County Homeless Navigation Collaborative. And then in his free time, Corey likes to spend time with his two dachshunds and has recently gotten way into, that's Corey's word, way into board games. So great to have you all here. Love the fun stuff. Um, I see a heart from Cullen who also has dachshunds. So anybody else, y'all can talk amongst yourselves. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to start with just some background information about the programs they're part of. And we'll go across in the order we've got our photos up. So Allison, Andy, and then Corey.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Blakeney. Thank you so much for inviting me onto this panel. I'm excited. So I work for Adams County, like it says, Department of Community Safety and Wellbeing in the Poverty Reduction Unit. And so within that, then I oversee all of the direct service work that we do, outreaching to homeless individuals. So we have a typical outreach where we go out into the streets, but we also have in-reach drop-in hours at a community center where folks will come to us. At the drop-in hours, I'll talk about that first, so that's kind of our longest program. We have mobile showers that Service Source runs, or sorry, mobile laundry, and then we also have showers there. So residents will come, they can get some laundry done, they can take a shower, and then we offer basic services. So food, water, hygiene kits, basic supplies, survival supplies, sleeping bags, tents, clothes, things like that. And we offer that to anybody in Adams County entirely, and including homelessness navigators who work for the cities in Adams County. They can come and pick up items for their residents that they're serving. And then on top of that, the navigators can navigate and do light case management with residents who are living in unincorporated Adams County. So as you all know, people who are homeless move around a lot. So, we just try to say around 80% of the time somebody spends their time in unincorporated Adams County, then we'll support them. However, if somebody bridges between the city and unincorporated, we'll then work with the city navigators collectively to work with somebody. So we also do that. Like I said, we outreach multiple times a week. And then another exciting project that we've been doing is the encampment resolution direct to housing. So this is like a project it's actually happening in Denver as well, that's been happening across the country. And it's where we apply emergency management principles to homelessness. So rather than a little amount of services over a long period of time, we take a lot of energy, a lot of resources, apply it to an encampment in a short period of time, 4 to 6 weeks, and we house everybody who wants to be housed in that encampment. That's part of the model. So that has been really exciting. And I think that I will stop there.
Great. So I'm Andy with Outreach Fort Collins. I agree, Allison. I'm very excited to be here and share a little bit of the work that we do. So thanks for having us. I'll give a little bit of a background story on outreach because I think it's helpful to frame the scope of service that we provide. So our team was started roughly 10 years ago, and it grew out of a conversation on community impacts that were not being addressed by emergency services and first responders. So a lot of calls were coming into our non-emergency and 911 system for safety concerns that were not emergent, for disruptive behaviors that were not illegal. Community members, business members were frustrated with some of the kind of disruptive behaviors, but there wasn't really an effective solution within our first responder community. And so a group of stakeholders came together with representatives from a variety of interested stakeholders and thought about how could we approach some of these issues that we're experiencing as a community different than just relying on law enforcement, relying on our EMS crews. And what was birthed was Outreach for Collins. So we started as a small team of three, kind of just in the walkable downtown area of Fort Collins. And slowly, incrementally over time, we've grown. So now we're currently a team of 10. We're kind of the entire college corridor, which is the main avenue throughout the entire Fort Collins area. We hit most of the major transportation hubs. And kind of from that, we really have two primary services that we offer. First is traditional proactive street outreach, where we're out in the community every single day, trying to meet people exactly where they are, to build trust, to build rapport, to build connection, ultimately with the hope of getting people connected to supportive services that can address whatever their immediate need is, whether it's unmet healthcare needs, whether it's behavioral health needs, whether it's housing, kind of letting it be a client-driven engagement towards the outcome that they're wanting to reach. But then interestingly, the other piece that we do is situational response. So calls that used to go into 911 or non-emergency can now go to our team. And we have the training, the tools, the compassion, the time to respond and try to resolve the situation or get to a place that doesn't have to involve law enforcement, that doesn't have to involve our first responder community. And so our team has a lot of training in de-escalation techniques, of trauma-informed care, of good situational awareness on how to just lower the temperature in any given situation, to approach from a place of person-centered connection and engagement, to try to get to build trust and rapport, learn people's stories, and then from there start to build the trajectory towards long-term supportive services, including positive housing outcomes. And so for our team, it's really that dance between responding in the moment and meeting kind of people in that immediate need while also doing the longer term work of building connection. Since we're an independent nonprofit, we're a small team. We don't provide a lot of the direct care services, and that's why collaboration with partners is so critical for us. So getting people connected to shelter, getting people connected to behavioral health services, getting people connected to a lot of those immediate need pieces that just support day-to-day life. We're going to be doing a lot of the warm handoffs to partners to help try to make that work done sustainably over time. And so that is one of the kind of the unique pieces of our team, that we really rely on community partnerships for a lot of our client support work. And so again, I think I'll leave it there and hand it off to Corey.
All right, and I'll say one more. Thank you all for having us, and we're excited to be here. Yes, I'm Corey Kohler. I work for the City of Wheat Ridge. I'm a housing navigator. And as Rebecca mentioned, we are part of a countywide collaborative. So about 6 years ago, some cities in Jefferson County got together and established an MOU and just had, kicked off this approach, mostly because there are no 24/7 shelters anywhere in Jefferson County. One will be opening in a couple of weeks, but that'll be the first. And so before this collaborative, there was no clear way for those who are homeless to access these kinds of services, and there wasn't really much outreach happening. So each city approaches it a little bit differently. For an example, in Lakewood, their navigators are embedded within the police department. In Wheat Ridge, we are not. We're under the city manager's office, but in each city it's a little bit different. But we all have the overarching goal of to use outreach as the main tool to address homelessness. In fact, some of the cities have partnered together. So we are actually, I work for the city of Wheat Ridge, but our outreach reaches Edgewater as well. Edgewater is just a really small city, and so they didn't have the ability to hire their own navigators. So myself and one other navigator who also works for the city of Wheat Ridge, we team up and we serve not only Wheat Ridge, but also Edgewater. We do not only outreach, but then case management, and we try to see people all the way through to housing and even after. Um, and then one sort of unique thing about our outreach and just the city of Wheat Ridge in general is because we are so small, we get a lot of people who are just passing through. We're kind of sandwiched between Lakewood and Arvada, two cities that have a lot more services than we do. And so we get a lot of people who are just on their way through from one to the other. So it can be kind of tricky to serve those people when they're receiving services elsewhere. But that's just a unique issue that we have.
All right, thanks. We will jump now. Thank you for those great intros and giving us a little background. We'll jump into our questions. Our first one, what outreach practices have been most effective in moving people from engagement to housing? And for this one, we'll start with Andy and then go to Corey and Allison.
Yeah, thank you. For me, the starting point is to start with the word engagement. Um, Predominantly, the folks that we're serving are unsheltered, and many with pretty lengthy periods of being unsheltered. And so we're working with folks that tend to be, at least at the start, fairly service disconnected, maybe service reluctant. Um, and so the engagement piece of taking it slow to build trust, to build rapport, to build a willingness to try to engage in the homeless response system when there's already been experiences of either being burned by it or having something fall through. So we really do take a lot of time and care to start just with that piece of engagement. Allison, I'm super excited to hear about the encampment model of 4 to 6 weeks of really intensive engagement towards housing outcomes. I think that sounds awesome. Our team tends to not be in that situation, but rather needing to take time first to build that trust and rapport to then be able to do the next work. So starting with engagement, the next piece I think is really what we call the magic of outreach, which is you're the right place, the right time, the right person, the right conversation to jump on it, and then really to try to make something happen so that we have the tools when someone's in that midst of either change talk or a willingness to engage, that we can make something happen in the moment. So it's not just a conversation of what might happen next, but what if we did something right now together? Whether that is connecting to shelter as the next step, whether it's filling out paperwork as the next step, whether it's getting on the phone and having a conversation with a case manager. Let's try to really capitalize on this moment right here and do something meaningful together. And then from there, the piece is then to really make sure there's follow through on it. So it's not just a one and done, but there's a really intentional, what is the next step? Kind of on a broad scale towards the housing piece, we've really leaned into our community's coordinated entry system as the kind of the main housing pathway. Certainly not the housing pathway for everyone. Some of the additional questions we'll get to is kind of the creative problem solving that is necessary. But we've worked really hard to be at the table in our coordinated entry, providing some leadership in that group to work really hard. And we do a lot of tracking to make sure clients are connected to that system as well as one of the housing pathways in our community. So kind of that's for us the trajectory is building first in that space of engagement, capitalizing in the moment, and then being in that space of collaboration to support the housing pathway.
I certainly agree with everything Andy said about building trust as being the first and foremost. And yeah, it's really hard to do everything after that unless you have a solid foundation of that trust. Um, I think once you do have that trust and that engagement, one of the things that has been really effective for us is to just have an idea of many different options, pathway options to housing. As as Andy said, we also utilize one home, our coordinated entry, but we try to make sure that we have our finger on the pulse of any and all housing pathways that could be an option. I've never found anyone to be housing resistant. Everyone I've ever worked with, they all want housing. It's just what that housing looks like can vary on how people feel about it. We can't force solutions onto people. Making sure that they have choice and autonomy is huge. So if I have a housing option or a housing pathway and I offer it to someone and they decline it, it could be for any number of reasons. But that, it's so easy to get discouraged about that. Even I might get really excited. Ooh, I have this housing option, and I present it to someone, and they say, no, that's not really for me. It's easy to get discouraged and just think, well, they don't want housing. But that's not true. They just, they don't, if they say no to one thing, it doesn't mean they're going to say no to all things. And so letting someone know, okay, that's fine. This one's not going to work out, but I'm going to keep my eye out and ears open for any other options. And when I come up with something, I will bring that to you and you can say no again. I'll bring another one to you. You can say no again, but just always presenting more options and so following through. If I say, okay, this is fine, and I'm going to bring the next thing to you, make sure to follow through with that. You can even try the same option again later. Something may have changed, maybe their outlook or, all sorts of things can change. And maybe you present the same thing 6 months or a year later, and they say, actually, yeah, I do want to try that. So that's huge for us is just make sure there are many different options that we present and not getting discouraged if those are declined.
That's awesome. I think one of the practices that our department does at the county, and a lot of folks do this, but hiring people with lived experience is pretty big here. And we define lived experience as multiple different things. But on the outreach team, we have people with homelessness experience, people who've experienced poverty, substance abuse, mental health. Um, so I find that to be sort of one really, really quick way that the staff build trust with residents and can also continue that trust, but it also just lends like the residents feel like, okay, you actually might have an insight into my daily life in a way that I think they don't often feel from providers. So that's one thing that has been really effective for us. And then from there, like defenses tend to go down and they are more open to alternate ideas that they maybe weren't open to before, or even just open to, okay, maybe the system won't screw me over this time. So like you both have said, along with that, then we have to pair that on the back end with follow through, and really making sure that we are delivering what we say we're going to deliver to them. So not over promising in the front end, and under delivering, but rather laying out the reality of the situation. And that's another thing that I've seen work really well, moving people from engagement to housing, laying out, like you all said, their options up front, right? So that they don't have an infinite number of choices, just like we all don't have an infinite number of choices for housing. Unfortunately, I wish we did, but they do have options. So laying out what those options are up front as early as possible, and then they can choose from there. Another thing for us is that we have with the homelessness resolution team. So we have some folks who are working on systems work as well as kind of housing, creating rapid rehousing programs that pair with our street outreach because so for example, we work a lot with Almost Home, a nonprofit here in Adams County, who does a lot of rapid rehousing for the Encampment Resolution Project. We have the outreach to the encampment, and then part of that is getting people into rapid rehousing where there's a financial subsidy and then also longer term case management. Similarly, we have a severe weather activation program, and with that, we've started creating a rapid rehousing program where people who are the highest utilizers of that severe weather program are then case conference to determine would they be a good fit for rapid rehousing. So that, because I think that a lot of times, like we're going to, like we all know, there's just not enough housing. And sometimes it feels like all the creativity in the world isn't even going to give us more housing solutions from the outreach perspective, right? So creating those programs with rapid rehousing has been really, really important for us as well. And I think that the last thing is that having our drop-in hours, our in reach where we are there pretty much like 49 to 50 weeks out of the year so that residents know every Thursday they can come and we will be there. And if we're not, it's a rare instance, you know, so that kind of consistency has been really helpful as well.
Great. And I think oh, sorry. There we go. As you all were talking, you did a great job of touching on or even diving into our next question. But I just want to give an opportunity to add, expand, or little repetition never hurt when we're taking in so much information. So, how do you introduce housing conversations with folks who might be ambivalent, distrustful, or have been unhoused for a long time? So, anything we want to add there? We'll go to Corey and then Allison and then Andy.
Yeah, this one might have some repetition, but you're right that that's okay. This one is tough because I completely understand why a lot of people might feel this way. So many of the people I talk to have started housing conversations in the past, or even gotten as far as filling out applications, and then they just never hear another word. Or maybe the goalpost was moved, and actually now you have to fill out this, or oops, that thing didn't pan out. And so we're actually diverting you this, like, which is not what you signed up for originally. So I think at best, a lot of people feel forgotten about, and at worst, they might feel lied to. So one of the things, or one of the ways that we approach this is just trying to build trust in other ways first, that maybe aren't the housing portion. Even just being consistent in our contact, like Allison was talking about, following through on things that we say we'll do. So, like, a low-hanging fruit, like ordering a birth certificate, even, forgetting about that, or, not following through in some way can just shatter any hope you had of any conversations after that. So following through on those little things can build and build and build. And then being transparent, again, these are your options. I can put you onto this list, but there are thousands of other people on this list, and I have no idea when your name might come up. Being transparent about little things like that on the front end, I think, can go a long way. But yeah, this is really, really hard.
Yeah, so agree with that. I think that one of the things that I have watched the navigators do and that I try to do when I'm working with residents is I really just try to understand who they are, what their life has been like, what experiences led them to where they are now, what they care about, what they dream for their life, what motivates them. Really trying to understand that stuff. And then I think getting the logistical ducks in an order, like Corey said, like doing those sort of vital documents, all of the things that somebody's gonna need when they are ready for whatever reason to go into housing. And I think too, for me, I try to operate on the assumption that I don't believe being homeless is wrong, And so operating from that baseline, where you are right now, it's not wrong. You're not bad. Like, so you're like, we're not going to operate from this baseline of assumption that we need to change something because you're wrong or bad, your situation's wrong or bad. And Mia, I thought that was you. Good to see you on here. But so, operating from that baseline, I think then it sort of like opens up the possibility for both us as providers to actually not know the right way for somebody to go and for us to find it together, the resident and the provider to find that together. Because I think also, although we as providers might think that we know a lot, I think sometimes we could be more open to being surprised in that way, and that might help us, that kind of humility. So that's what I've watched our navigators do.
Both great, and I'll reiterate a little bit. One of the mentors that I worked with liked to use the phrase, "We don't have authority, we just have influence." And when something is rooted in relationship, it opens the door to be honest with each other. And so Alice and I really like that. Start where someone's at, and housing doesn't have to be the answer for right now. But particularly when we start to work with folks that are really vulnerable, or the situation that they currently are in starts to be really unsustainable, that we have the relationship to be able to name that and say out loud, kind of, this is what I'm seeing, and to make that repeated offer. We would like to help, see if we can change the way this is going, not through authority, but through relationship and through influence. I really think, Corey, you touched on just transparency, particularly working with folks where the housing outcome may be really complicated. Trying to name that up front so there's not surprises along the way, because we've seen it so many times when you get 70%, 80% through, and then the one kind of wrench gets thrown in it, and then it's like, well, we're done, it's over. And the client kind of goes back to square one versus saying, no, we had talked about this, we anticipated this. Here's the next step we're going to take. Here's how we're going to advocate for you. Here's how we're going to work on a workaround. So that the fewer surprises in that pathway, I think the better. Knowing that we can't control everything, right? Knowing that sometimes we do reach kind of an end on one housing pathway, and then we need to pivot to another one. And so, yeah, trying to be really mindful of building the social capital and where to spend that well, when to be kind of more in that advocacy role on behalf of a client, and just being mindful of all those pieces.
Great. Thanks all. A lot of relationship building and communication and consistency and transparency. Thank you for sharing all of those examples. We're going to dive into a big one. So we know that a lack of housing options is a challenge for really all of us, but a challenge for outreach teams certainly. Could you share with the group an example of a time that your team was creative in finding a solution despite those limits? And for this one, we'll go to Allison and then Andy and then Corey.
Okay, yeah, this is a tough one. I think that what comes to my mind again is our encampment resolution project and really Clutch Consulting and also Community Solutions. We've worked with both organizations to sort of coach us through this project, the pilot of it. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Clutch is that they have this mindset of when we face a barrier, we then figure out an alternative way around it as quickly as possible. So, for example, a resident, doesn't have an ID. Well, we figure out, will the landlord work with them and use a Clarity ID that they have through HMIS? Will they take, a temporary ID? Like, what are they willing to work around? And what does the landlord need from either us or the rapid rehousing organization to be able to house this person, right? And also that goes for backgrounds, that goes for any kind of barriers that we might be facing. I would say also the big thing for us with Adams County is a lot of the residents we work with and for are they are focused on Adams County. They want to stay here. They don't want to go to other cities around. They don't want to go to bigger cities. They like sort of the suburban, rural-ish area of Adams County. And so really finding places that are in their community. We have seen people choose to go back outside because the housing that they have been in is not in their community. It might even still be in Adams County, but it's not in their community. So that's not a creativity, but that's a thing that we have to solve for regularly. And I would say that the residents actually come up with creative solutions. So we just had a few folks who decided that they wanted to live together in the same apartment. And one of them, they were out on the streets together, these two guys, really good friends. And one of them is just becoming the caregiver for another. And they really like that. They work well together. They live well together. They watch each other's backs and they have for a long time. So they actually tend to come up with those creative solutions a lot. And yeah, that's where I'll stop.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good. And here it seems to be like just the all the above approach, right? That going in with a single idea or a single pathway isn't going to be enough in a lot of situations. And so having in mind what are all the different pieces. And for us, we as I've said a couple times, we really lean on collaboration so that we have the partnerships in place so that when we're hitting a barrier, we're leaning on the expertise of folks in different spaces to say, what would you do or what could you do? Can you invite someone else in and say, help us navigate this? I would say, particularly with folks with difficult backgrounds, it's a place we've leaned into our partnership with law enforcement, officers that know clients really well and are really ready to write letters of support and attest to folks and the work that they're doing, to be able to help the landlord have that added layer of trust and support that we can work together. I think that's a really effective way to bring in law enforcement partners or first responder partners. Um, but yeah, again, just trying to lean in on the personal agency of the folks that we're working with, to say as you navigate the challenges, what ideas do you have? What would best help you in your current situation, particularly in the land of street outreach, as a team not connected to a broader system of support, recognizing housing is only one of the positive outcomes that we're working towards. And so that isn't the only thing that is on the table. It might be shelter. It might be reunification with family. It might be diversion of another kind. It might be treatment support. And so rooting it in where an individual is at this moment and letting that be the starting point, that we can be working towards multiple positive outcomes, of which housing is one of them.
I agree with the all of the above approach. And I apologize. A lot of these are going to be very Denver Metro specific, but we partner with an organization called Housing Connector that approaches properties ahead of time, and sort of independent of us, and asks them, "Will you lower your screening criteria for these particular group of clients?" That's been really helpful for people who, not even for the criminal records, but a lot of people just have low or no credit scores, or have a lot of debt. So that's been good for that. There's an organization that does home share. So, low income, usually seniors, who might need help around the house. They go through this third party nonprofit to rent out their rooms. And there's a lot of vetting on both sides, but those can be very affordable options. We've even gotten bus tickets for people if we can verify that they have family or friends in other parts of the state or other parts of the country. We can send them there. And then I guess one very specific example, I was working with a gentleman, and I didn't really have any options for him. And it took months of working with him and listening to all of his stories and contacting other people he had worked with, including some of his doctors. And after all of that, I finally pieced together that he had a brain injury, and then was able to make a referral to the Brain Injury Alliance. And this is, sprinkle a little bit of luck in there, of course, always. They happen to have some vouchers at some of their properties. So he was able to get housed that way. But that's just kind of illustrates, again, always being open and aware of what people might qualify for based on their very specific, unique circumstances.
Great, thanks. And I feel like normally I would be scribbling stuff down, so I'm glad this is recorded because there's a lot of great gems in here for folks. And I'm really excited for folks on the call today to hear from you later of what things do you want to try and what things are you trying that you're hearing from this group today. So we'll keep it moving. Cullen, do I need to stop for any questions right now, or should we go to the next question for the panel?
We're good to go right now.
All right, we'll keep it going. So our next question, how do you maintain engagement with participants during transitions between outreach, shelter, treatment, and housing? How do you all define a warm handoff in practice? And what steps make it successful in your community? And part three of our question, what role does outreach play after housing placement, if any, in your program? And for this one, we'll start with Andy and then go to Corey and Allison.
Yeah. For the first of the three-part question, consistency is, I think, a really, really important here, right? So how do you maintain that engagement is that you keep showing up. You keep coming out in the community, you keep meeting people where they are, to build towards the place where you can actually then start the transition. And so a lot of times, if we have a client that we've been working with, we make an appointment for next week. It's pretty easy for that next week appointment to disappear into next week that doesn't exist right now, right? And so we're going to have three, four, or five touch points between now and that next appointment to make sure there is that continued engagement with each other. Yes, some helpful reminders, but also just that piece of how are you doing today? Anything else you need, so that we can build to that place of a transition. To be really successful in our handoffs, I think it means being really, really networked with our partners. It's one thing to pick up a phone and call. It's another thing to be able to say, we're going to call this person. We're going to walk there together. I'm going to introduce you. When you feel comfortable, you can let me know, and I'll stay as long as you want me to be there. If that means hanging out for the entire appointment, I'm willing to do that, so long as you feel like you're cared for in a safe place and have your needs met. So making sure it's as warm as possible, as personal as possible, and that there's a good amount of kind of prep work so that folks know kind of what the experience is going to be, what the physical environment's going to be, what kind of the questions that might come up might be, so that they really have a sense of what they're getting into. And then in terms of what does outreach look like in terms of after housing placements, I'll name this as one our team has recently named that we want to get better at. We're pretty good at the handoff, building that connection, getting kind of all that intake piece happen. But then we found that we do one or two check-ins, and then it kind of drops off from there. And so we've recently said we really want to be intentional with a 6 month engagement process to make sure that the relationship just doesn't come to an end after housing, but we become supportive. We do often, though, get brought back in that if a housing placement starts to be rocky, if there's concerns that come on, we want to make sure the landlord or the provider that's overseeing knows we're a part of this client journey, and that we can be brought in at any point to help navigate things that aren't going as well, to try to be an advocate. So we do that part well, but I don't think we're as intentional as we could be in making sure we're looping back and checking in and making sure the client is feeling stable in that housing placement.
I'll agree with the first part. Definitely consistency is huge. And yeah, just to be, as genuinely interested in how things are going for your client as possible. I've encountered plenty of times where we might a handoff is on the horizon, and the client will say, "Oh, okay, so once this happens, I'll never talk to you again, right?" And so trying to again get ahead of that, and reassure that that's not the case, and we don't want that to be the case. Um, as with Andy, I prefer an in-person warm handoff, where the three of us can all be together. There was one time we got a client matched with a voucher, a housing voucher, and they went in to just fill out the paperwork. And that's something that's I'm really glad I went, but because it can be very easy to be like, oh, it's just paperwork. It's not that big of a deal. They can go do that by themselves. But the person at the housing authority was just not trauma informed whatsoever, and frankly, just rude to our client. And I felt like if I hadn't been there, that could have gone off the rails. And the people at the housing authority, or at least this particular person, was very, like, if this doesn't go well, then the offer's off the table, essentially. Like this whole thing is not going to happen. So it is very important to be there. I know it's not always possible, but when you can, definitely make sure to do that. Um, and then after housing, we do have an aftercare program here. So we maintain contact with our house clients for 1 year, at least 1 year after they're housed. And we try to be proactive about it. So we even have a schedule of like, okay, reach out after 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and then again before their lease is going to be renewed if they're in a situation with a lease. Um, so we try to as best we can to stick to that schedule of times to reach out, but then the actual reaching out itself, and this is really hard. We're still refining a lot of this, but just asking how are things is not always good because a lot of people will just say fine, and you might need to do some digging to get to some issues that might be on the horizon. Um, there's a lot of reasons people won't bring things up to you. I've encountered a lot of people feel shame if something goes wrong in their housing placement, or they don't want to disappoint us or other case managers. They feel guilty for having to ask for more help. So we just realized that you can't wait for people to reach out to you and bring issues up with you. You do have to do some of that digging. And again, we're still refining that process, but it is very important. And we try to be, again, as consistent as possible after the housing placement too.
Yes, definitely a lot of what you both said, I agree with. For us in Adams County, one thing that gets tricky is really finding people on the streets because we have a big river and a lot of outdoor space that runs through the whole county. A lot of our residents actually will be hiding in the brush. They prefer that. And so it can take a lot for us to find people. But one positive thing about our community being so sort of tight knit, I guess is what I would call it, is that a lot of times the rangers actually know where people are. They're out on the trails regularly. We have a really good relationship with them. They are very compassionate. And we also have somebody who does graffiti removal for the county, and he works in our department, and he actually builds a lot of relationships because he's just out on the streets a lot. So those folks will actually see people a lot and will know where people are, which can be really helpful for us to be able to find them during outreach, because it's just heartbreaking when staff has worked so hard to get somebody a vital document and then we can't find them now for another month, and it feels like we're kind of on that Groundhog Day experience where we're just trying to do one thing and one thing over and over again. So again, like I said, having our drop-in hours and that consistency is really helpful. We have a Lyft program too, where we can send people a Lyft ride to our drop-in hours. So of course, there's a cap on that, but that's really helpful as well to get folks to our drop-in hours. We're right on a bus line. So that's been really helpful to maintain engagement. As far as doing warm handoffs, yes, in practice, meeting with the provider would be great. There's some times where we can do that. So, for example, encampment resolution, we can do a warm handoff with the rapid rehousing vendor, and we do that right there. So we set up like pop up our shop at the encampment. So we'll have a tent, table, generator, that type of stuff. The rapid rehousing coordinators will come and they'll meet the residents with us right there. That's really great. But there's times where that's not possible. In that case, I try to do as close to a warm handoff as I possibly can. I try to fill in the resident about who this person is, when they might be contacting you. Sometimes I'll try to get other providers to come to our drop-in hours if the resident is there right then. Just say, hey, can you come over? Do you have any time today? So try to do that type of stuff. And then after housing, so we're pretty strict in that we have to be working with people who are literally homeless, and we don't really have a lot of wiggle room working with people who are housed. We have a couple exceptions. So we do a stabilization case conferencing with the encampment project with Almost Home. So we'll kind of collectively case conference, provide extra support for the residents once they get into housing, um, just for up to a certain like couple of months. And then if we house anybody through Housing Connector, we've got an exception that we can actually provide that year-long case management after with them. So that can be really helpful. I would say that that doesn't mean that navigators can't talk to the residents. So we'll have residents who get into housing and they still want to chat with the navigators, and they'll do that. It's just more about we can't provide our services to the residents once they're housed, which is hard. It's like those rules and regulations. It's hard to face somebody and say, I can't give you this because this is the restrictions on the funding. So yeah.
Well, thanks all. I appreciate you getting into the how, but also the why, that this is so important and an important piece to have in place and to continue to improve. I'm gonna have just two more questions, and they're meaty ones, for our panel, and then we will jump into Q&A. But Colin, anything pressing right now, or may I continue?
You're good to go.
Cool. So we'll do two more, and then we'll definitely pause and have time for Q&A as well. So, how would you describe your outreach program's partnership with first responders? And then what advice would you give to communities that are wanting to start up partnerships or strengthen existing partnerships with their first responders? And for this question, we're going to start with Corey and then go to Allison and Andy.
So Wheat Ridge doesn't have its own fire department, so we don't have much of a relationship with EMTs, but which I think would be really fruitful. But we do have a great partnership with our PD. We meet with one of their division chiefs at least monthly, so we have a regular cadence there that we can exchange information. A lot of the officers will text us or email us directly with referrals of people that they notice or that they met while they were on patrol. We also have a great program where we provide police officers with outreach supplies. So we'll put, snacks, maybe bus tickets in the winter, hand warmers, gloves, socks, things like that into little bags that the officers can then give out to people directly. So that helps them build rapport with the people who are on the streets, which, will go a long way towards helping us. The officers also appreciate that. They don't want to have animosity or a tense relationship with the people who are out there. We also work really closely with our code enforcement officers, so like police light, but they are the ones who typically respond to encampments. And we are on a text thread with all of those officers and our park rangers, so we'll get notified to new camps or new individuals in real time. One other thing I guess an overarching thing is we try very hard not to be present for any type of enforcement actions. We don't want people associating us with the, move along type, or getting citations. We don't want to be associated with that. So we make sure to keep a distance. We don't want to be present for any of those actions, but maintain the relationship with the police itself. We regularly present to new police recruits as they are onboarded so that they're aware of our program and what we do and don't do. Our PD also has a mental health co-responder that we work very close with, and we can exchange referrals back and forth. In terms of advice, this is sort of maybe not nuts and bolts advice, but sort of feelings advice. But one thing that I think about a lot is recognizing and proceeding from the recognition that even though our motivations might sometimes be different, I like our PD, but as with any PD, there are officers or maybe someone's having a bad day, but like our motivations, of course, are always I want to help this person. An officer's motivation might not be that motivation. It might just be I want this person to go away. But both of those motivations can lead to the same result, which is finding this person housing. Like us helping this person and finding them housing still satisfies what the officer wants, which is for them to not be there. So recognizing just that even if we're not here for with the same motivations or for the same reasons, we both want the same end result, can go a long way to just sort of reframe how that partnership looks.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah. So it just depends on the first responder body, basically. Like I mentioned, we have a really good relationship with the Rangers. And I'll just give you an example. We had a guy who was out on the streets 10 plus years, and he was getting old, and one of the rangers actually found him mid heart attack, and just by chance, and she saved his life. Um, and then they referred him to us. Myself and one of the navigators went out. We were working with him, and they had recently posted his camp again. And we said, listen, we've got a housing resource for him. Please give us time because we can get him into housing. Can you please wait to move him? And they were more than happy, because I think for for a lot of enforcement bodies, it's incredibly demoralizing to be sort of just moving people along, and they want a solution as well. I think that what's interesting about our department is we have code enforcement in our department. So under the community safety and well-being, we have enforcement here, which is on the face of it seems like almost like we have opposing work. But just to what Corey was saying, what's really helpful is that often code officers are actually encountering the encampments, and for them to have somewhere to look to a resource, which is us internally, they will let us know, hey, I just want to let you know we found this encampment here. Then we can go and outreach to those individuals and try to get them some support. Similarly, we are not there for any kind of enforcement, right? That is really not our role, and it's really imperative that we don't engage in that way. The advice I would give and the way that I generally try to approach people in general, like I've mentioned before, is I am interested in people. I'm interested in suspending my own judgments and beliefs, which, we might all have a lot about different first responders. I'm interested in suspending my judgments and beliefs for a brief moment to try to understand where somebody's coming from. And when I can do that, and when I have done that, I find that I can actually serve our residents better, which I think is actually the most important thing. What is going to serve the residents? Is having a positive relationship with these enforcement bodies going to serve the residents? Yeah, it is. When I can have those positive relationships, I can say, hey, can you please wait, like I said, with the rangers to move this camp, things like that. We also have co-responders that work with the sheriff's department, so we can reach out to them. One thing that the co-responders suggested that we do that we haven't done yet, but is go and talk to all the deputies about our encampment project, because often in those kind of structures of hierarchy, there'll be something that gets, the captain gets a sort of 2 hour meeting, and that gets passed down. And by the time it gets to the deputies, it's like a 10-minute briefing before they go out on their shift. And so a lot can get lost in those conversations. So having us be able to go in and talk with the deputies ourselves and even build that face-to-face relationship would be something that I'd like to do.
Great. Yeah, I would say outreach for Collins specifically, kind of the first responder partnership was kind of in the DNA of our program just because of where it started with both police services, our physical health provider, our mental health provider being on the committee that led to our creation. We knew that collaboration was going to be really an active part of our program, and we've been able to strengthen it kind of the whole time to the place where right now, if a call comes into 911 dispatch that's more appropriate for our team, they'll send the call to us so that we can be the responding body rather than a first responder. It has taken time to nurture that relationship and the trust in our program that we're going to respond well. But it has allowed us to be invited into places that we would not be invited otherwise. Kind of within that, we have a MOU with police services that kind of is the bedrock of our partnership. And on Outreach Fort Collins, on our side of it, one of the most critical piece is client confidentiality. So kind of this mutual agreement that when a referral comes into our program, we'll receive information and we may only share back a tiny bit. We're going to really protect the work that we're doing with our clients. If I'm going to get to a place of disclosure, I'm going to get client permission first. So we have a release of information that we sign. We explain the partnership. And then sometimes in particular, like if I am working with a client and say, I would love to follow up with an officer and just kind of share the work that we're doing. Do I have your permission to do that? And make sure it's kind of that transparent conversation up front. And what we found is all of our first responder partnership partners understand that, support that, get that we're doing different work that are working towards similar outcomes. So I was pulling the data. In 2025, we received almost 350 referrals from police services for folks in the community that they had concerns about that they wanted to see get connected to support. So those are just touch points with people in our community that likely we might have had otherwise, but there's a chance that we wouldn't. Um, to what's been said before, I also think park rangers, natural area rangers, the folks that are on the ground seeing people are equally important. Just those eyes and ears of who's in the community and who's in need. We've also been able to work towards being at the table for our cleanup coordination, which is somewhat unique since we're a separate entity. But being able to be at the table to know when cleanups are happening, advocate when there might be a service pathway that's happening that would be interrupted by that. But then to Corey's point, making sure we're also not present at any time of enforcement or any time of cleanup so that there is a separation of what our role is and what our role is that supportive engagement to build connection to service. The advice I would have is sometimes, especially kind of as a standalone entity, it can feel daunting going into these big systems. And so my advice would be to start with who's your champion, who's the one officer, who's the one EMT, what is the one fire station that you have relationship with, and use that as the entry point. Let people champion the work that you're doing on your behalf.
I love that. Great advice, and thank you all. That was a rich place to dive in. And we've got one more question from us, which is related, but here we go. What other key partnerships would you encourage other outreach teams to pursue, and what does that look like for you? So maybe talking about how you formed the partnership, how it benefits your program. And for this last question, we'll start with Allison and then go to Andy and then Corey.
Yeah, wow, I was just thinking about so many different partnerships. One thing that I have found to be really useful is having, like was mentioned, I think in an earlier question, having actual people inside of, alternative organizations or systems that you can contact and try to get connected to the resource. So having people who face to face who are working in different organizations. I've used that for all different kinds of housing resources, to be honest, with some of our housing support here, as well as sometimes the referral process for different housing resources online is a little bit convoluted. But if I know somebody who works for that organization, I can reach out and ask them directly, what's the email for this resource? I have somebody, I really want to get them in. That has been really useful. Something that I think that we have been trying to do, and we still have got a lot of work, is having some kind of partnership with people who work for either the DMV, work for these vital document organizations. This is something that I've both heard from other city navigators in Adams County that they are trying to build and that we are trying to build because that tends to be pretty daunting for certain people who don't have an in-state ID or have never had an in-state ID, were born in a different state. It can take a lot of time. And the restrictions in Colorado, as you guys all know, for IDs can be really daunting as well. So that has been really super helpful for us. We formed these partnerships, I think, like has been mentioned, through consistency, I just think that that's the best way to engage with humans in general, no matter who we are, where we are in the system. It's going to benefit the residents if we engage with people both consistently in terms of how we show up with them, but we also engage with them regularly, so that we maintain that relationship with them. We will also invite people to our drop-in hours so that they can sit, they can table, they can talk to our residents. We've invited Bridge House. They've come and talked with our residents and just hung out at the drop-in hours. Anything libraries has come. They're going to start coming regularly. So that's been a really useful partnership, and it benefits the residents, and it also allows them to have access to those services and those people outside of us, which I think is really important too.
I would definitely second libraries as a really good place. I think that um, there our populations have a lot of overlap. That is the place that we've been able to establish our drop-in hours. It's the only place we consistently meet folks that aren't out on the streets. And so to have that partnership to serve their patrons, I think that's a huge one. I would kind of broaden that a little bit to just what are the other places in the community that are having frequent engagement with unhoused individuals, and how can we leverage our understanding of the homeless response system to benefit their work. So I think emergency departments are a big one. We have worked really hard to be well known, both in terms of social work, the crisis assessment team, so that when there's discharge happening, that if we can be looped into that discharge to try to be part of that handoff back into the community. Similarly with our mental health provider coming out of any kind of acute care, if someone is lacking kind of that connection in the community that they're being discharged to, loop us back into that so we can try to help smooth that reentry into the community. So just what are those other places where there already is that frequent engagement? We want to be experts in the homeless response system, while other people can be experts in the work that they're doing. And that's where the partnership, I think, can be most fruitful is let us help you do your best work while we do our best work.
I'll echo those as well. Libraries and hospitals, we work closely with the social workers at our local hospitals, and they alert us to folks who might need our help. This may be just the benefit of being a local government, but when the program first began, we gathered together at least one person from each department in the city to meet regularly and discuss how homelessness shows up in each of those departments. And from that came a lot of our really deeper partnerships, like with Allison has mentioned, Parks and Rec staff, open space staff, who are often the first to find and interact with people. Um, there's also some other local nonprofits that have outreach teams that we might overlap with and can collaborate with. Stride is an organization that provides street health care. So they have an outreach team. We also have through the county public health, there's a harm reduction team that goes out and does needle exchanges and things like that. So making, and to Allison's point, consistency, making sure that those relationships are there, and we communicate with those people regularly to find out what they're seeing. They can ask us about what we're seeing. And one final one is, again, local government, but our rec center, which is where we have our drop-in hours. We also partner with them to give free showers to our clients. So, they trust us that we are sort of vetting, or just that the people who are coming in for showers are working with us, and we just provide names, and they put them in their system and they can shower there for free. So that's been a really fruitful partnership too.
Thanks all. A lot of information came our way today. That is the end of our questions for the group. I would love to see what folks have either in the chat or just raise your hand. And I'm going to actually stop sharing so we can see a little bit better. Colin, I know you've been monitoring the chat. Do we have any questions so far?
Nope. Chat's been pretty quiet today.
It's quiet. You guys are like me, taking it all in, maybe taking some notes. Was there anything that you'd like to hear more about, or maybe even something that you would like to try yourself? Um, a new idea for you? Anything folks want to share? All right. You know what I might do? Folks are thinking, marinating a little bit. I might move us over to our eval, and then I'm going to ask for questions again. So, because I think we might have some. So I'm going to move us. Colin, actually, sorry. I think that is you, but I
Yeah,
will pull up the.
so we are going to launch and eval a meeting poll So you should see a window pop up that has the questions. You should be able to click through those pretty easily. If you don't complete the eval, we will follow up with the SurveyMonkey link, where it'll be the exact same questions, and we'll go from there. All right, you should have got the Zoom poll popped up on your screen now.
Nice show. We've got 24 folks on the call. Many of us are panelists or work for SHG, so it's a good odd for the good odds for the drawing. Just want to throw that out there. Really good odds if you complete that right now. Helen, I see responses are coming in. You just give me the sign when you are ready for me to uh, keep it moving.
Yeah, we'll
Give it another.
probably give another 40 seconds here, or give it a good 3 minutes. It should stay up until the end of the meeting. And like I said, we will send out an email tomorrow morning with a link to the Survey Monkey, which exact same questions. So if you don't complete it today, there will be an additional opportunity. I will say that we actively review the surveys, analyze them, and make changes based off of the content and feedback we receive. This isn't just, a check the box exercise for us. We are really committed to continuous improvement and wanting to make sure we're providing the most meaningful and valuable learning circles and virtual assemblies for our Lift Academy participants. So we appreciate it.
Great.
Alrighty, I think we're good to move on. We have a good number of responses here, it looks like.
All right. Thank you all so much for that. As Colin mentioned, it is an important part for us, so appreciate your time on that. And then as promised, I'll open it up one more time for any questions. And all right, I'm
I
gonna,
would I would have a question actually.
yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I'm curious about, and any panelist can respond, I'd be curious what strategies have been the most effective in terms of building partnerships with um, places like emergency rooms, police departments, etc. Because I think it's becoming more commonplace that street outreach will collaborate with those programs. But I'm curious if there are things that have been more effective or less effective in your experience.
One of the things that comes to mind first for me is understanding their scope of service as well as their workflow. So like just wanting to connect with an emergency department, but without the understanding of how their patients are flowing through their system. It's one thing to show up and say, I want to help you. but it's another place to say, like, what is the right entry point into that? It's probably not physical, the medical side of things. It's either the crisis assessment team or it's the social work team. And so breaking down these large systems into their smaller parts and then figuring out what smaller part has the right place of overlap. For us here in Fort Collins for police services, we're really we have kind of two main teams that we interact with. One is a dedicated team that they have for homeless outreach engagement. So that's a pretty natural fit. And then the other one is our downtown unit. And so rather than the full police services, we really focus on those two smaller departments for our main place of an engagement. So again, it kind of aligns with that champion piece of what's the smaller entry point into the larger system.
I think Andy um, addressed this already, but one of the things that we try to consider too is just how can we make their job easier? Um, and so I think specifically in with our PD, when we giving them these outreach bags, I think they really attach to that because it helps them do their job better. When they're just talking to someone on the streets and not having anything to offer, it can feel frustrating for them, or just that it doesn't really go anywhere. And so having something to offer that we provided them um, has gone a long way. So yeah, I think just what is something we do and we can that we can offer to them that will make their job easier, or yeah, that will help them in some way.
Yes, yes to both of those. To that end, one thing that not on the outreach team, but in our poverty reduction unit, we get the transit assistant grant from RTD. So we get those bus tickets, and actually we give those out to the Rangers. So although that's not us engaging with the Rangers directly, it's the entire poverty reduction unit. And that also means something for when we're trying to engage with them. And then I would also say that the ranger supervisor has somebody from the outreach team come and give a presentation whenever they hire a new ranger about our work. And then also to what Andy said, where the overlap is with what they're going to do, what we're going to do, and kind of what we both tend to do and where we might engage in and overlap. And that has proven to be really successful. And it also helps us build a relationship with the individual rangers right there on the spot, in their onboarding process.
Thank you. That was a great question, and I think a great way to close out, getting more wisdom and more tips from our panelists. So please, everybody, join me in thanking Allison, Andy, and Corey. That was amazing. You all have so much to share, and we really appreciate your time today. Um, as we close out, and hopefully here we go. Just want to give folks a reminder, we'll have the recording up and the slides posted on the webpage. We have two upcoming events highlighted here on the slide, but there are many more on the calendar. So it helps us plan a lot if you register ahead of time. So please go ahead and take a look at what's coming up and get registered for the next few events. Thank you, everybody.